I do want to get to the latest twist in this wild Michigan football story. And it's interesting because it feels like this Michigan story, it's like every single time that you look up, there is a new twist, a new rumor, a new report about this story. Monday, we got the report from ESPN, 30 plus Big Ten games attended or tickets purchased by Connor Stalions. Tuesday was the report from Yahoo. And by the way, if you can't keep up with all this, who can? But Tuesday was the report from Yahoo that it wasn't just the Big Ten, that Clemson, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, schools like that Michigan could potentially play in the playoff had also been scouted in person, or at least there were attempts to get there. Wednesday was the Washington Post report that there was basically a $15,000 slush fund to get tickets for all these games. I believe it was 8 Ohio State games that were attended in person or expected to be. Georgia, a half a dozen, whatever. And so I bring it up because there's a new story every day. But there was one very juicy tidbit from a website called footballscoop.com that came out on late Wednesday in reference to the Washington Post report that is at least worth discussing very quickly here because I think it's interesting. That report that another school was involved and that Michigan helped in their process of stealing signs, helped another school along the way. We'll get into who. We'll get into what, but first, just let me read the report from Football Scoop. Here is the exact, wording from them. It says in an article posted on Wednesday night, moreover, a source with direct knowledge indicated to Football Scoop that Michigan may have attempted to assist the opposition of a potential college football playoff opponent in an effort to disrupt that team's path to the playoff. Okay, so first of all, really quickly, for people who are not familiar with Football Scoop, very credible website, okay? It's a website run by, I think, former coaches, people that are in the college football world, very plugged in. A website that does really well with coaching carousel stuff in November, December, January. Credible place. And they're just not the type of place that would just throw stuff against a wall and make stuff up. But it is very interesting. And it obviously, when that report came out, led to the question of well, crap, who could it be that Michigan was allegedly potentially assisting? Well, the internet is undefeated, and the internet has essentially narrowed it down to one school and one school essentially only. I don't want to say one school only, but there's one school that seems to be the obvious one. And before we go forward, I want to do the caveat. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm not accusing a school, a coach, a coaching staff. What I will say, though, is when you dig in, when you read the reports, when you start to put puzzle pieces together, there is a very interesting team that emerges. Again, not accusing anyone of anything, but it's at least worth having the conversation. This coach will probably be asked about it, and he will have a chance to defend himself. That school is the South Carolina Gamecocks, and obviously they are coached by Shane Beamer, but mostly it's just that South Carolina is the school involved. So first of all, the question becomes, why South Carolina? Does that even make sense? Well, first off, remember, the Yahoo report on Tuesday said this wasn't just about scouting the Big Ten, but anyone that you could potentially play in the playoff, apparently, except for TCU, who actually beat Michigan. Okay. So according to the Yahoo report, Michigan staffers were definitely in attendance for at least one Tennessee game early in the season, or late in the season last year, when Tennessee played Kentucky. They destroyed Kentucky, incredible victory, whatever. And that also, again, other schools are involved. And so why would it be South Carolina? Well, South Carolina had an interesting season last year. Not accusing anyone of anything, but let's just talk out the facts, okay? South Carolina entered November not playing very good football. Final couple weeks of the season, they play Tennessee and they play Clemson, two teams that we know were scouted in person by Michigan, okay? Why do I bring it up? Week before, South Carolina played Tennessee. Lose at Florida. Florida wasn't good last year. Remember, Florida was bad. They finished 6-7, lost in a bowl game, got destroyed by Oregon State. Go to Florida, lose 38-6, and have 237 yards of total offense. Not a great performance. They're at 6-4. They lost to Missouri a few weeks before that. They weren't playing very good football. Then all of a sudden, Tennessee comes to town. Tennessee, of course, at that time, I think is ranked in the top 3, top 4, top 5. They did have the loss to Georgia at that point. But if Tennessee won out, they were very much in playoff contention. They would have only had a loss to the number 1 team in the country. Well, what happens? South Carolina, week before that, scored 6 points in the Swamp, 237 yards of total offense. Thank you, everybody, as always, for your support of the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. And we have a major announcement as legal sports betting is now in the state of Kentucky. That is right. The Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube has partnered with DraftKings Sportsbook and the DraftKings Sportsbook app. And here is the best part. DraftKings has an incredible offer for listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod who are first-time customers with DraftKings. This is the deal. Here's what you need to know. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Bet $5 on any game, just $5, and you get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you use the promo code Torres. That's right. It's that simple. Again, first-time customers, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Bet $5 on any game, pro, college, any sport you want, and get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you use the code Torres. Thank you to our new partners, DraftKings Sportsbook. Thrilled to be working with them. Take advantage of their offer now. They end up putting up 63 points on 600 yards of total offense. And listen, I get it. SEC road game in the Swamp versus SEC home game at night in Williams-Brice Stadium. But that's certainly interesting that they couldn't even get into the end zone against Florida a week before. They put up 63 points against the Tennessee Volunteers. Then, oh, by the way, a week later, remember, Clemson was in the college football playoff discussion. They lose to Notre Dame in early November, but they're a one-loss team in the ACC. And if they win out and win the ACC, they're going to the college football playoff. Just so happens that South Carolina, for a second straight week, plays maybe the best game of its season, destroy Tennessee one week, beat Clemson last year on the road to end the regular season. And I remember talking about it at the time. It's like, wow, where did South Carolina come from? Destroy Tennessee, beat Clemson. Maybe they just caught Tennessee on the wrong night and the momentum rides through. Obviously, unfortunately, that was the game that Hendon Hooker got hurt. But I bring it up because it was like, where did this team come? I cover this stuff for a living. I'm not rooting against anybody. I'm not rooting for anybody. But it's like, wow, this is kind of a cool story. Out of nowhere, they're awesome. Then, oh, by the way, a few weeks later, they lose their bowl game. So that's one. So one, people say, well, why would it be South Carolina? Well, we know Michigan scouted Tennessee and Clemson in person. We know that South Carolina was not very good before they played Tennessee. Then all of a sudden had a magic elixir, was awesome against Tennessee, was awesome against Clemson to end the regular season. By the way, South Carolina, not very good this year, starting in the top 25, currently sitting at 2-5 overall, going into their game against Texas A&M this weekend. Beyond that, there's other circumstantial evidence that is at least worth mentioning. Tennessee fans will tell you, now I have not been able to independently verify this, but there are pictures of South Carolina players wearing wristbands on defense. Tennessee fans will tell you that had not happened for South Carolina all year until that game. I cannot speak to that, but there are pictures of South Carolina players with wristbands on, not normal on the defensive side of the football. Beyond that, it is worth noting the South Carolina defensive coordinator did work with Jim Harbaugh at Stanford a few years back, so about a decade ago. So there are obviously ties between the staffs. That happens in college football. Again, not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just talking this out. And then this is an important piece. And again, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but this is a fact. Do you guys and girls remember the 2014, 2015, the WikiLeaks scandal? Do you remember that? Wake Forest, if you remember. They had a rogue announcer. They had I think it was their color commentator on their radio broadcast. Former player was not retained by Dave Clawson, and his staff gets mad, starts leaking stuff to other teams. Why do I bring it up? 3 teams have information from Wake Forest leaked to them: Louisville, Army, and Virginia Tech. And who was the assistant at Virginia Tech that got all that information? It was Shane Beamer, the current head coach at South Carolina. Now, Shane Beamer at the time released a statement. He was fined. He was at Georgia by the time all of this came out. But he was fined, and he said, look, man, this is somebody I knew in the industry. I didn't think he was giving me any kind of information. So I'm just telling you the facts of what happened. I'm allowing you to draw your own conclusions. But South Carolina is not very good. Then all of a sudden are great against Tennessee and Clemson, 2 teams that we know Michigan scouted in person. Beyond that, ties between the 2 coaching staffs. Shane Beamer has been involved in stuff like this before. And I also think it's worth noting one other thing from the Michigan perspective. And I think this is a question a lot of people would ask. Well, why does Michigan care about South Carolina? Why do they care about Clemson? Why do they care about Tennessee? Remember, first of all, listen to the wording of the Football Scoop report. Moreover, a source with direct knowledge indicated to Football Scoop that Michigan may have attempted to assist the opposition of a potential college football playoff opponent in an effort to disrupt that team's potential playoff path to the playoff. And so what you have to do is you have to go back and remember what things were like in November of last year. Not accusing anyone of anything, but remember, just think about the facts of that moment. Who was in the hunt for playoff spots? Georgia, they were cruising to an SEC championship, and we were like, okay, they're in. TCU at the time was undefeated. We're like, if they went out, they're in. Then the picture started to get murky. Tennessee, everyone was saying if they're 11-1 and they don't win the SEC East, but they have that big win over Alabama. Remember, they beat Alabama, and their only losses to the number one team in the country, they should be in consideration. Remember also, Clemson at the time had one loss. If they won out, 12-1 ACC champ, they're probably going to the college football playoff. And of course, who else was in that mix? Two undefeated teams in the Big Ten that were on a collision course, Michigan and Ohio State. And so the thought process goes that if Michigan were to lose to Ohio State, if Clemson's in the mix, if Tennessee's in the mix, they might not make the playoff, especially because if you remember, much like this year, the out-of-conference schedule was abysmal. And so I bring it up because there was motive for Michigan to make sure, hey, let's get Tennessee out of the picture. Let's get Clemson out of the picture. So I'm just saying that Football Scoop report, very, very, very interesting details. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, is there a lot to peel back again. By the way, for people who would say that it's unfair of you in the media to accuse anyone of anything, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. And again, Shane Beamer will probably be asked about it. And if they did nothing wrong, there should be very easy ways to confirm that. But this is an interesting twist. And it sounds like somebody was helped. Was it South Carolina? Was it somebody else? I don't know. But again, if it wasn't South Carolina, it'll be easy enough to deny and prove. We'll see if anything comes of this report, but very interesting report. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. We are breaking down every piece of this Michigan angle. It is unbelievable. It is surreal. Click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. A lot of great college football content on this channel.